We left off in the last video with replacing an intake air temp sensor that had failed at Mr. Mike's garage. We also figured out how to make a spare phone work as gauges. We got a couple things left to do to the car before we head out for the big event. I'm glad we were able to figure out the intake air temp sensor and also figure out a few gauges. I'll have to dial in those settings a little later, but now I want to get my e-brake working. Got some parts and pieces here. We're going to figure out how the drum system works on the rear. The e-brake is actually a drum. It doesn't just squeeze the caliper like the stock S13s do. But honestly, first, I need a haircut. Alright, much better. Let me show you how the e-brake looks as it is now. This is how I got the car too. Never adjusted it, never messed with it. So somehow, some way, it does actually lock. But it has to go all the way to the top notch for it to even lock. And I noticed while watching some clips of this car drifting, when I do try and use the handbrake where I would typically want to extend my drift, it only locks one wheel. I'm pretty sure it's the left rear. So I don't know if maybe just the cables need to be adjusted or what's going on. But either way, you typically would only want the handbrake to go up like this far for full wheel lock. Of course, I'm going to inspect what's going on in the rear, but while we're in there, we're going to replace the shoes, and we also have some hardware to go with it. It's always a good idea to have spare drum hardware. And then we have some new rotors. With the caliper off, we can now remove the rotor and see what we're working with. Alright, so right off the bat, I'm noticing some scoring going on the inside of the drum here. I personally think drum e-brakes are ideal. They lock up way better than the traditional S13 style like squeeze caliper. Basically, when you pull the cable on the drum, both of the shoes spread out on the inside of this here circumference. This hardware is looking pretty old. Luckily not crusty, so I'm sure it'll work well with us. So let's take it apart and hopefully remember how it all goes back together. Now I highly recommend, if you're going to do anything with the drum system, take some pictures of how all these springs and hooks and hardware goes on. You'd be surprised once you take it off and you're like, wait, where does this go? Just good to take some pictures. Now this is still pretty crazy to me, but the way you start disassembling and taking off the shoes is pushing in this pin and just twisting it a little bit, and then eventually it just comes out. That's all that holds it in. Isn't that crazy? Well, then I guess you gotta pop off these springs, but still, I don't know, that's just, it's a little wild to me that that's really all that holds these shoes in. Alright, I went ahead and took everything off, and I tried to lay it out how it was installed on the car. We have our anchor pin down here on the bottom, 2 shoes, 2 springs on top, 1 spring down below, and then this bracket piece connects to the cable. And this cable is what is attached to your handbrake when you pull it. So let's compare this stuff to our new parts. These are Project U pads, PMU. A lot of drift cars use these. I guess the friction material that they use is better. Very nice packaging. First thing I'm noticing is these two have a pin here, and these two do not have pins. So the pin tells me that's most likely what this anchors on, which means we're gonna have to swap this piece over, which also means this is for the right side. That would match us up. Alright, let's match this guy up. And that one looks like it goes there. Alright, so these are for the other side. This horseshoe clip looks really fun to get off. It looks like there's a washer on it too. Good to know. Let's compare these pieces of hardware to our new stuff here. Hopefully that comes in this package. Yep, I see a little horseshoe in there. Nice and clean. And a wave washer. I got this bracket swapped over. I think that was the hardest part. Now everything that we can see witness marks on, we're going to want to put some grease. So we got our chassis grease over here. People always ask, it's just full synthetic grease, I guess. Put some on there. Put some on here. Now the fun part begins. Instead of putting these clips on first, I think I'm going to try and install the anchor pin, I guess the new anchor pin, and that spring on the bottom. So I'll match that one up and get that installed. And it's looking like it's going to be this orange one here. Yep. Wow, a lot of colors going on. Looks like we need to thread in this piece of the anchor. And you can see this is not exactly centered. So I'm matching it to the old one here. It looks like it goes in this side. And then the other side doesn't thread in, it just kind of sits in there. Now the ends of these need to be greased where they attach to the shoes here. So I'm going to go ahead and grease right there. There's going to be some stuff over here that needs some grease. Alright, I got everything all connected. I just try and shake it around just a little bit, make sure everything's snug and in position. So far so good. I was able to get this piece in there correctly. I'm not even sure what it's called, but it is a bridge between these two here. There's an anchor down there that's connected. I think we're good. Next step, let's throw on the new rotor. Now we're going to be utilizing this tiny window here. Slide this on first. Now there's no need to spray brake clean on these because these are zinc coated. Now see how there's a little bit of play here? I like to put on like at least 2 lug nuts. Luckily these are open end so they won't bottom out. Doesn't need to be crazy, just needs to stay straight. This is where it gets fun. Let's pull up the e-brake. Maybe 3 to 4 clicks. 1, 2, 3. Okay. Now with 3 clicks up, we want a slight drag on the drum. So it's free spinning right now, so there's no drag at all. So we can use this small window here and try and spin up that anchor. Just for reference, I already did this side. Not adjusting it, but you know, new hardware and all that. This is what we're trying to spin. So you gotta remember which way you need to go. You can just barely see that anchor in there. Oh, starting to hear something. I'm gonna go a couple more clicks. Oh yeah, we're feeling it now. I'd call that a slight drag. I need to go adjust the other side now. Alright, I went ahead and adjusted the other side. I pulled up the handbrake a couple more clicks. Now I'm going to adjust it even tighter so that it doesn't move when I try and spin it. Still got a drag. I'll keep going. Well, I'd say we're about ready for a test drive, but since I'm putting new rotors on the rear, I want to go ahead and put new pads to match. I wanted to put these on when I had my new calipers done from powder coat, but it is what it is. You can always swap the pads over to new calipers. For Z calipers, I find it easier to just install a caliper to replace the pads. They're not like traditional brakes on regular cars. The caliper isn't floating, basically. It's fixed to the knuckle. Just like the drums, might be a good idea to take a picture of how the clips are in there. But these are really simple. Just take out these 2 pins, center clip falls out, and then you just slide the brake pads out. Let's apply some grease everywhere the brake pads will be touching. Now I mention this every time I do brakes because I always see this out in the wild. Usually there's only 1 pad with the squeaker, sometimes there's 2, sometimes all 4 have them, but in this case only 1 brake pad in the box had a squeaker. The squeaker goes on the back side trailing, so if the wheel rotates this way, trailing is the bottom. So this goes on the right side back. It just slides in, it's that easy. I absolutely love Z-brakes for this reason. Something else you can do that I forgot to even look at is tighten your cables. Now back there, that's just kind of adjusting the shoe diameter within the drum. The adjustment over here will actually relieve some of the slop that I'm getting right here. You can see that there's one singular 10 mil nut here that'll pull the cable further up. I haven't adjusted it yet, so I wanted to show you guys how much slop it has. You can see just how loose this is. It's just slopping around in there. I'm only going to do this a few turns at a time because you really don't want this to be dragging your e-brake also. A little bit can go a long way here. Alright, let's go for a test drive. Oh, I almost forgot. Pushing the brake pedal all the way. We just did brakes, so sometimes you have to reset the pistons. And my foot did go to the floor, so that was a little scary. That's weird. You get a really loud click sound when I engage the e-brake. It works great, that sound can't be right, you know what I mean? I wonder if it'll at least lock up. Oh, it works good. works too good. That's weird though. I really don't know what could be causing that. Another thing I'll do is I'll find a very gradual hill, nothing that's too extreme. You can't really tell, but there's a slight slant in the road, so I'll drive forward and then I'll pull it like 1 or 2 clicks, and you still want to be able to roll back just a little bit. That just verifies that we are not dragging. This stuff can be pretty finicky and it can take a long time to dial in correctly, but once you get it dialed in, you're set. This thing is really set, but I don't know why it's making that noise. I really don't want to take it apart. That don't sound right. Alright, I took everything apart and I did notice this piece was upside down. I looked at some diagrams and I just matched it to what the OEM was. I wonder if that will make a difference. Guess we'll see. I'm gonna go take apart the other side just to verify. Probably should have looked at some OEM diagrams before instead of just trusting however it was in the car, but here we are. All back together. Test drive part 2 or 3. Yeah, I don't know, man. That is really strange. You guys have any ideas? I'm just gonna send it like that. I mean, it works. I just verified everything's still connected fine. Moving on, we gotta do an oil change, and also I need to make sure that there's not coolant in the system because they don't allow coolant at the track. I'm gonna drain just a little bit and see if it's colored or whatnot. I thought I put distilled in it, I can't remember, but either way I have distilled, I'll throw in there regardless. The last time I did an oil change, a lot of you guys recommended I use the Valvoline VR1, so that's what we're gonna use today. You know what? I'm gonna grab a funnel. I always spill oil. I don't know what it is. You guys always tell me what these bugs are. What is this one? Is that a centipede or something? He has crazy legs. I don't know. I've never seen something like this. Alright, there was definitely some coolant in there. Now it's really important to actually use distilled water and not just tap water out of your sink or out of your hose, because if you don't, then your engine is going to rust from the inside out. Not like detrimentally like a car would, but when you open your radiator cap it'll be sludgy. You don't want that. The alternative is to use distilled water and water wetter if you want. I've found great benefits with using water wetter. I'm gonna need to pick them up. I don't have any here. But you can run on just distilled water, no problem. Obviously not in the winter. This is not gonna be a winter driver. But I am gonna have to swap coolant back over since it gets below freezing here. If I don't swap it over, then I could risk cracking my block, cracking my radiator. I don't know about the turbo. Water does go through it, I don't know. Either way, you don't want to do that. And since we've just completed a bunch of maintenance on the Z, I'm gonna log it into my Z list. I just put the date, mileage, and then what I did. It'd be impossible to keep track if I didn't do that. Well, it turns out I need to leave for the drift event tomorrow. And there's still quite a few things I need to do to the Z before it's ready. There is this one modification that I really am not proud of, but I'm gonna share with you guys anyways. And I never recommend these to anyone, and here I am using them. These are considered rack offset spacers. Basically the point of these is to correct steering geometry when you use a drop knuckle or a modded knuckle. That helps keep the inner tie rod parallel to the lower control arm. And the whole point of doing all that is to reduce binding while steering. Now ever since I did install these drop knuckles, which have been great by the way, I've had this strange problem where at full lock the wheel will not self-center. How it should handle, how my 240 actually handles, is when you're at full lock it should naturally want to go back to straight. The Z, however, when I go full lock it wants to stay at full lock, which is not beneficial. You want the car to basically drive itself on the course. You don't want to have to overcompensate the steering wheel. And honestly, the real fix to this issue is to relocate the rack and pinion forward, at least on the S chassis, just because of the design. This is very similar to the S chassis setup, although an S chassis subframe does not fit directly into the Z without modification. I'm using a Z32 subframe, and the reason I cannot relocate my rack and pinion, when I dropped in this KA, the oil pan sits in front of the subframe. The stock engine, the VG, has the oil pan sit behind it, which is rear sump. So I had to notch the front of the subframe, basically doing the opposite of a rack relocation. So if I move the rack forward, there'd be no more subframe left, if that makes sense. So ideally, I'd like to make a whole new subframe for this, but we're not gonna have time to do that in one day, so that's down the line. These are basically just gonna work as a band-aid. I do not recommend using them. Why? Because they blow out your racks. The rack is not designed to take a load at 90 degrees like this. My rack's already blown, so I'm not too worried about it. And by blown, I just mean it's making a lot of creaking sounds. I'll try and film a before. That way I can try and show you guys how the inner tie rods look compared to the lower control arm. I don't even have an Allen socket this big, so we gotta go on a parts run to start off. I'll try and explain this the best I can. Firstly, check out this triangle. Basically, there's less of a gap here, and there's more of a gap here. That's gonna be a problem. So now that we're turned all the way to the right, look at how close that is to the control arm there versus here. The distance is the same here, but it's significantly closer over here. Turning to the left, same thing. So moving the inner tie rod mount forward is gonna help that become more parallel with the control arm. So to start us off, let's take off the outer tie rod from the knuckle. Then we'll remove the boot here and then get that inner tie rod off from the rack. Well, I guess I didn't really need to disconnect the outer tie rod, so I'm just gonna leave that one on just in case. Now the adapter just goes in between the inner tie rod and the rack here, and these are directional, so you gotta be really careful that you don't put them on the wrong side. I don't even know if these are gonna work for the Z rack. I just bought them on a whim on Marketplace. Let's try and determine which side is for which. Okay, that doesn't look right. It's pointed straight down. Starting to think the Z32 rack is different than the S chassis. Let's try this one. Okay, I guess that moves it forward a little bit, but it's raised. It's supposed to just go straight forward. Since it does move the inner tie rod mount forward just at least a little bit, I am gonna still at least attempt it and see if it even makes a difference. I'm gonna put some red Loctite on the threads, same with the bolt. Now we'll just thread the adapter on. Figured it'd be easier to at least get it started like this. Now let's put it on the rack. Turns out you need to put the spacer on first. The bolt wouldn't fit through with the inner tie rod attached. Now since we are spacing this out, we're gonna have to reduce these threads that go into the outer tie rod. Otherwise the front end is gonna be towed in like crazy. We got the inner tie rod installed onto the adapter here. Unfortunately you can't run a dust boot with it, it'll just get crunched in between here, so we're gonna have to eliminate this, which is pretty unfortunate, but it is what it is. But with how towed in this front wheel is, I think I'm gonna have to swap out these Q45 inner tie rods for S14s. I know these aren't exactly lined up perfectly, but this one is S14, this one's Q45. S14 is just a little bit shorter. Got it all installed, S14 inner tie rod. I did a quick eyeball alignment without even throwing the wheels on, and you guys are gonna love this. I raised the car less than half an inch. I still need to do it to the rear still. I've been meaning to actually raise it. It does look good like this, but it's just not functional for how often I drive it. But I'm sorry I'm rushing right now. I'm actually running late for an alignment appointment, so I'm gonna bolt on the wheels, raise the rear, and then drive to the appointment. This will be a quick before shot of the current fitment. One finger. Let's see how much higher we go. After. Two finger. Not bad. Still looks good. This thing drives pretty straight. That's crazy. This is the first try, and this is how it drives. It does return the center a little better now. Not as well as I'd like. I'm hoping with this alignment we can reduce some of the caster, which would make it more snappy. But it's definitely better though. So clutch. And we're having our boy Mr. Israel do the alignment. Luckily our boy works down the street. You guys don't remember, he has this sweet Toyota. We showed this in a recent video. He got this Mark II, it was auto. He already lowered it, manual swapped it. This guy's getting to work, he don't mess around. Such a cool car. You're smart. Yeah, that would definitely hit. Oh, here we go. We can get a really good shot of the inner tie rods now. So you can see where the rack is versus where the inner tie rod is and how it's closer to parallel with the lower control arm. How was our readout? Oh, I blocked it. I forgot about the sensors.
Yeah. It's not too bad. It's actually pretty straight or pretty even, left to right.
Wow. Not bad for 30 seconds of trying.
Front.
This is toe?
Yeah. That's positive.
Within 1 degree?
Yeah.
I impressed myself.
Camber, caster's dead even. And that's the rear.
That's the rear? Oh, weird how the toe is uneven now. Interesting. So whenever you align a car, you want to start with the rear. So we're gonna adjust the toe and maybe match the camber setting.
Yeah.
This is our toe arm right here. And then
Cambers up there.
yeah. Well, the front, yeah, there's two on top. The front one's for caster, and the middle one is for camber.
Yeah.
Israel got the rear end buttoned up. We're looking at the front end stuff here. Usually you want to do camber, caster, toe in that order for adjustments, but we're not going to touch camber. We're going to do caster next. So this is our caster measurement right here, 8.5 degrees. Something that I've wanted to do is put the wheel farther forward, if that makes sense. When I am at full wash, there is some rubbing happening in the back of the wheel well and absolutely nothing on the front. I guess I had the numbers backwards in my head. I thought less of a number meant more self-steer, but it's the other way around. So right now Israel is shortening the tension arm, which is going to, oh, it's lowering the number. Interesting.
It's not live, so I have to do a caster sweep.
Oh, you have to do a caster sweep again?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Caster's the only one that's not live currently.
So, doing a quick caster sweep. We only adjusted that one arm. We just wanted to see what it looks like after. The measurements, that is. Oh, look at that, it's green. Okay, so it did raise the number. Interesting. For this chassis, the higher the number, the more forward the wheel is. Got the caster evened out. Now he's doing some final touches here on the toe. Green is good. Well, Mr. Israel, thanks for getting the Z right.
Of course.
I'm excited to drive it now that the caster's in the green. I'm sure that made a difference. I guess it's a good thing I raised the car before I came. Look at how close it was to the lift. Oh my goodness. That would have definitely scraped before, I think. Sick. Definitely self-steers a lot better now. But now this brings us to our next issue. I think my throttle position sensor is going out because it only works at like 6%. Like anything below 6% of pressing the throttle down does not read, which creates a really boggy ride at low speeds, and it's also really annoying while cruising on the highway. Got the computer hooked up in here, and here is our TPS percentage. I'm lightly pressing down on the gas pedal, like really gradually, to see when it starts, and it looks like it's working just fine. So I don't know what was going on with that. It goes all the way to 100, no dead spots. Maybe there's something in the tune that can be adjusted. Mr. Mike was able to give me a quick remote tune while driving up to the event, and it fixed the issue. We have successfully arrived in one piece. This is kind of like the calm before the storm, you know, the day before an event. But I guess I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.